Hello, it's the Cryo Lady. So, what I'm going to talk about is my abusive ex-senior naval officer husband's secret son. Yes. So, as a backstory, I met my ex-husband in 1989 and we got married in 91. We had our first child in 92 and we had our last children, which were twins, in 2003. Now, after years of abuse, etc., I finally got him removed from the house by the police, and let me tell you, that was not an easy thing to do. But anyway, so he subsequently got married again, as I have, and he's had another son. But this relates to something else. So earlier on this year, my eldest daughter, Banksy, she got in contact with me and told me this story. It transpired that this man who was born and lives in Australia got in contact with my ex-in-laws, Pammy and Rodent, and basically, well, through Ancestry.com, and told them that, well, they were his grandparents, and it was obviously, it's undisputable. He struck up a correspondence with them, and strangely also with their only daughter, Poison Dwarf, but no contact with Jambles, and it's Jambles who's his father. Now, let's cycle back. So before I met my husband, or when I met my husband even, he was on a ship called HMS Edinburgh, and HMS Edinburgh had previously been deployed and had gone to Australia. It was probably alongside for a month or so over there, and during his time over there, he met this woman. They obviously, they were both, I guess, young, free and single. Although, to be fair, I think at the time he did have a girlfriend, a long-term girlfriend at home. And actually, yeah, that sort of all makes sense now, really. So this girl obviously got pregnant. Now, there's a few things that I do know. I know Jambles. I know him very well. I also worked as a psychiatric nurse for 27 years, so I know people. Anyway, I'm going to tell you that when she found out that she was pregnant, he most likely gave her his ship's address, okay? And I would imagine, because it's British Forces Post Office address, and I would imagine she tried to get in contact with him, and I would imagine that she tried that quite on a number of occasions, and he never responded. He didn't respond. In those days, sort of in the 80s, late 80s, we didn't send emails to each other. It was all post. Everything was done by post. And, it was also kind of quite difficult would have been almost impossible for her to find any kind of phone number for him as well. And the Navy definitely would not have helped at all. Now, what I know is I actually had a little bit of correspondence with this son. Okay, he's about 36, 37, something like that. And I only did that because I did it on behalf of one of my sons who wanted to make contact with him, but also wanted me to make contact first, which of course I did. Anyway, he basically, all he really said about his childhood was that he'd had a colourful upbringing, and that was it. He said that his mum had gone on to have another child quite some years later, who's quite a bit younger than he is. He said they're not very close. He said that if his mother knew he was in contact with his biological father's family, she would go nuts. She would be very, very, very angry. He said that he'd tried to speak to his mother about his father, and he just said it was a no-go zone. And the little information that he could, he knew very, very little information. He said he'd once seen a photograph of his father, and then his mum had basically found out that he'd found it, and the photograph was ripped up and thrown away. So why do that? Why do that? If you're very happy, if you find yourself pregnant in the late 80s and you're extremely happy to go it alone, you don't want any input, you're absolutely fine with it, no problems at all, why would you get so angry about that? Why would you refuse to discuss the father? Anyway, I think we know the answer to that. That poor woman most likely tried and tried and tried to contact Jambles, and he completely ghosted her. Now, here's the thing, right? He's basically had no further contact. He stopped contact with Rodent and Pammy and Poisoned Wolf. We do know that finally, because Jambles was very, very reluctant to speak to him. Why would he be reluctant? The guy's 36 years old. He's not going to make any demands on Jambles at all. He's got his own life, his own successful life in Australia. He works for a public service, I won't say which one, as does his wife. They have 3 beautiful children, and they also have all of her family. His best friend is married, I believe, to her sister. So, they've got a lovely life. I very, very much suspect, so he wouldn't be making any kind of demands upon Jambles at all, in any way, shape or form. But yeah, I think he's gotten to the bottom of what his real father, Jambles, is like. Jambles is just sort of, apart from being an abuser and a committer of domestic violence and a coercer, he's also a narcissist. He's quite narcissistic. And the other thing as well is that he cannot take responsibility for anything in his own life. If things go wrong for Jambles, it's always someone else's fault. So my advice to this man in Australia, this secret son, is just keep it that way. You'll get nothing from these people. You'll get nothing but heartache, because they all stick together like glue. I mean, Jambles, there's nothing that he could do that would stop his parents supporting him. He could be a predator, he could be a murderer, he could be anything, but they would still think that it was probably someone else's fault, and they'd always support him as much as they could. So my advice to him is just stay away. You've got a good life. You do not need that. Maybe you'll understand why perhaps your mum was like she was.